Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hidden Harmonies podcast. This is episode number 4. Hello, and welcome to all of you, those who are returning listeners and viewers, but also those who are new to the podcast and even perhaps to the channel itself. I'm John Paul from John Paul Piano. I'm the one who does this podcast. So just a short little introduction to the podcast for those of you who are new to it. This is a podcast that I try to do about once a month, and I talk about a composer or a piece of classical music that is hidden and underrated and sort of never performed that I think should be performed more. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm sort of trying to spread the knowledge of all of these hidden gems of classical music that are very sadly not played. So that you're aware, we are on YouTube under John Paul Piano, especially for those who are listening, like on Spotify or something like that. We are on YouTube under John Paul Piano. We are on Spotify under Hidden Harmonies Podcast. We are also on iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and we are on Instagram under the Hidden Harmonies Podcast. So please follow us on any of those platforms that you're on. That helps us a lot to really get these great works of classical music out there, sort of spread the love for these hidden gems. And lastly, before we get into the actual episode, there's a form that you can fill out, link down below in the description, where if you have a composer or a piece of music that you know of that you think is underrated and sort of hidden, that you would like me to feature on this podcast, you can fill out the form, link in the description, and I will try and do my best to feature some of those works in an episode here and there. In fact, the next episode, episode 5, which will be next month, just might be from a suggestion that I got in a form, so we will see. Lastly, I would just like to apologize real quick for the lateness of the episode. I was planning on it being a little later because this is the piece that I am talking about this month is Easter themed, so I didn't want to put it out like early in April because we still had weeks till Easter. So I wanted to wait till it was closer to Easter, and the plan was to release this Easter week, but I've been extremely busy. I've had lots of rehearsals, performances, and practicing and things to do because I have exams coming up and juries and performances and things like that. So I hope you all understand that life just sort of took over a little bit. But here we are, we're back. I will do my best to not let that happen again, but no guarantees because I am a university student, so I am very busy a lot of the time. So this is sort of secondary for me right now because my studies and my musical journey, my practice and performances sort of take precedence. So I hope you all understand about that, but I'll do my best to not let that happen again. So now let's get to the composer for this episode. So the composer for the piece of music for this month is George Friedrich Handel. Handel was a German-British composer in the Baroque era. He was especially, his style is especially known as High Baroque because he composed sort of during the peak of the Baroque era. He lived from 1685 to 1759. He was born in Germany initially, but he moved to and ended up making his home in London where he lived for most of his life. There is the famous story, perhaps legend, we don't really know if it's quite true or not, but it's a fun story about Handel. Is that when he was younger, his father was quite opposed to him playing the keyboard and being in music. So I forget the full story, but I think his mother maybe or someone helped him to sneak a clavichord into the house, and he would put it, I think it was in the attic, and he would sneak up there like at nighttime or something while his dad wasn't home or he was asleep, and he would play it secretly. So that's sort of a fun little legend. You don't really know if it's true or not, but it's sort of a fun story to share about Handel. He was born the same year as Bach, actually, as Johann Sebastian Bach. These two, Bach and Handel, are the two main figures of Baroque music, and they really helped to fully pave the way for all music that we've gotten since them. So they were born the same year, but they actually never met. They were going to try to meet in Germany, but they just barely missed each other. The timing was just off, so they never actually got to meet, which is sort of interesting, seeing as they're the two major figures of Baroque music. So Handel wrote lots of music, lots of Baroque music. He wrote 24 oratorios, 42 operas, which, to be honest, you wouldn't really know that Handel wrote opera just because they're never really performed, but he wrote 42 of them. He wrote tons of cantatas, organ concertos, concerti grossi. Popular compositions from Handel include, of course, the Messiah, the oratorio, that has the famous Hallelujah chorus in it. Fireworks music, which is a piece for orchestra, and water music suites, concerto grosso. There are a couple of those that are fairly popular. And then some of the arias, like single arias from oratorios and operas, are fairly popular works that Handel composed. So what's the piece of music for this month, though? For those of you who are familiar with Handel, you may have already figured this out, but remember that what I do here is I do a hidden gem. So if you say the Messiah, sorry, it's not the Messiah, but it is another one of Handel's oratorios. The piece for this month is La Resurrezione, or the Resurrection Oratorio. This is a very lesser-known oratorio. I said he wrote 24 oratorios, but the only one that's really ever performed is the Messiah, sadly. But this is a wonderful oratorio that should be performed more, the Resurrection Oratorio. This is why I wanted to wait until it was sort of closer towards Easter to release this episode, is because it's quite literally the Resurrection Oratorio, so it goes along quite well with Easter Sunday. So this work, the Resurrection Oratorio, was first performed on Easter Sunday, actually, in 1708 in Rome. So this is not sort of a typical oratorio in a way. It's more like an opera that is not staged, where there's no acting, there's no props or anything like that I'm aware of, but it doesn't have a full chorus or a choir, which sort of makes it a little different than most other oratorios. There's only single vocalists, soloists, who each are a character in this oratorio. So the characters in the oratorio are Lucifer, who is a bass, Mary Magdalene, who's a soprano, there's an angel, who is a soprano. Technically speaking, the angel is supposed to be a male soprano, but nowadays I believe typically they just use a regular female soprano, seeing as male sopranos are somewhat rare. John the Evangelist is also in the oratorio, who is a tenor, and then Mary Cleophas, who is an alto, also technically supposed to be a male alto, but once again, I'm sure nowadays they probably just use a female alto. So what's the story of this oratorio? Because it's in Italian, so unless you know Italian or you get English subtitles to it, you're not really going to know exactly what they're saying the whole time. So it's nice to know sort of the background story behind this oratorio and what's actually going on, seeing as you don't know the language. So there are a couple different parts to the oratorio. It runs about 2 hours long-ish. So typically if it's performed, they do like part 1 and then intermission and then part 2. But here's the story behind it. So part 1 is set on the Saturday night before Easter Sunday, or Holy Saturday. It alternates this part. The first scene in this part alternates between the angel singing the praises and glories for what Jesus has done in conquering sin and death on Good Friday, and then it alternates also between Lucifer, who is confused and confounded at what is going on, because seeing as Jesus right now is in the tomb, it's Saturday night, going into Sunday morning, going into Easter Sunday. The angel is singing for the gates of hell to be opened and to have Jesus resurrect from the tomb and things like that. But Lucifer, of course, is very confused about this. He thinks that he conquered Jesus on Good Friday when he was crucified. So he's very confused and confounded about this. And so this part alternates between the angel and Lucifer. The next scene goes to the followers of Christ who are grieving over the crucifixion. So these characters are Mary Magdalene, Mary Cleophas, and St. John. St. John in this scene has a special part because while the other two are sort of grieving over the crucifixion, St. John is trying to keep hope in the words of Christ. When he said he would rise from the dead on the third day, St. John is sort of trying to keep that hope alive in these other two. And then the end of part 1, or the end of Act 1, ends with a victorious chorus where all of the characters join to sing a chorus. They sort of get out of character because, Lucifer wouldn't technically be doing this, in reality. But the singers just sort of form a chorus out of character, and it's just a very triumphant song of praise to God for conquering sin and death. So that is the end of Act 1. Of course, that's very compact. So, if you want, you can go and you can find the full sort of more in-depth story online. But for sake of time in this video, I'm not going to quite go into that much detail because there's lots of different things that go on. But that's sort of the general outline of what happens in Act 1. The next act, or Part 2, occurs on Easter Sunday morning. So the first act was Saturday night. This act is Sunday morning. So this starts once again with another sort of duel, as it were, between the angel and Lucifer. Once again, sort of the same type of thing, but this time it's Sunday morning. So now Jesus has actually risen from the dead fully. So Lucifer is very confused and upset about how this has happened and how his plan, which he thought was what would work, when Jesus died, he thought, that's over now. But now Jesus has risen from the dead, so now Lucifer is very confused as to how this has happened. The next scene is the two Marys, Mary Magdalene and Mary Cleophas. They decide to go to the tomb where Jesus had been buried. This is sort of a hopeful part to this act, a hopeful aria that reflects the hope that they have that Jesus has risen. They are trying to keep that hope alive, thanks to St. John in the first act. At this point, St. John says that he is going to stay with Mary, the other Mary, so Jesus' mother Mary, not either of the two Marys that we've just been talking about. There's a lot of Marys in Scripture, but the mother of Jesus, that Mary, St. John is going to stay with her. So the other two Marys decide to go to the tomb. St. John stays back with Jesus' mother. The next part to this act is the final appearance of Lucifer, who admits that he has been conquered yet again by what Christ has done on Easter Sunday, and he admits that Jesus has risen, that he's been conquered, and it sort of ends when Lucifer falls back into hell. Handel mirrors this quite interestingly, because he sort of has the singer and the orchestra, the instrumentalists, do a descending scale from the highest note to the lowest note, sort of signifying that fall of Lucifer back into hell. It's quite interesting. The next scene after this, the two women, Mary Magdalene, Mary Cleophas, meet the angel at the tomb now. This is sort of the first interaction between natural people, so the two Marys, with a supernatural being, the angel. And Handel once again mirrors this quite well with a difference in things like instrumentation and things like that in the actual music itself. So the two women meet the angel at the tomb, who announces to them that Jesus has risen, and then the two Marys then meet with John the evangelist, St. John, and tell him this good news. St. John tells the women that Mary, Jesus' mother Mary, who he has been with, has also seen Jesus. So Jesus has appeared to his mother when John was with her. And then Mary Magdalene tells of her encounter with Jesus in the garden by the tomb, which is told of in Scripture, in the Gospels. So then the oratorio ends. This is the end of the oratorio. It ends with a very triumphant final chorus of praise and thanksgiving. It's a very triumphant, joyful ending, and Handel writes it quite well to sort of embody the spirit now of joy and thanksgiving that Jesus has risen. So that is the story of this oratorio. I'm not positive if there is a recording of this on YouTube or a video that has English subtitles. You might be able to find that. But that is sort of the overall story of it. Like I said, I'm sure that you can find a more detailed version of this online if you look. In the music itself, Handel mirrors all of the different emotions that are portrayed in the text and in the singers quite well, such as fear and hope and joy. He deals with all of those different emotions, and he writes the music to go along with the text very well, where you can tell that there's a certain fluctuation of emotions and differences and things like that. So it's a very delightful piece of music to listen to. It's a very well-written oratorio, and you can sort of tell the story itself simply from the music, even if you don't exactly know what's going on, simply due to the fact of him changing between major and minor keys, instrumentation, and sort of what the singers are doing as well. So now let's listen to the first couple minutes of it, maybe the overture. We'll see how long that is, and if it's not too long, we'll start the first couple minutes of the first aria as well. But we'll see. So we'll listen to the first couple minutes of this, hopefully to get you interested, where you'll want to continue listening to this and finish listening to this oratorio once this podcast episode is over, and then we'll get to the conclusion. So there you go. I hope that got you interested in this wonderful oratorio. I highly suggest that you go listen to this piece. I'm sure that you can find 2 hours at some point this month to listen to the complete oratorio. So make sure that you go do that. Also, listen to the other more popular works of Handel if you haven't listened to those already, such as the Messiah oratorio, the water music, and the fireworks music and things like that. Those are all very nice pieces to listen to by Handel. So make sure that you go listen to those as well if you haven't heard those already. So thank you all for watching. Please leave a like, comment what you think, and share this podcast around wherever you are. Fill out the form below as well if you have a suggestion for a piece or a composer that I should feature on this podcast. Once again, please follow us wherever you are that we are, such as we're on YouTube under John Paul Piano. Please subscribe there. We are on Spotify under Hidden Harmonies Podcast, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Instagram as well under Hidden Harmonies Podcast. Even just clicking that follow button or the subscribe button helps us so much because it helps the algorithm to boost the episodes in the podcast up in the search results. So please make sure that you do that wherever you are, that we are as well. So thank you all for joining us. This is the Hidden Harmonies podcast, which is your gateway to the forgotten corners of classical music. This is episode number 4. This episode's piece being the La Resurrezione, or the Resurrection Oratorio by George Friedrich Handel. I'm your host, John Paul from John Paul Piano on YouTube. Thank you all for joining. Keep spreading classical music through the world.